Hi guys, and welcome back to Amy's Cooking. If you love bread, you are gonna love today's recipe. I will be sharing with you how to make coconut pandan milk bread. These little guys are so addicting. They are soft, they're very light, they're fluffy, the color is beautiful, the inside is very moist. This is one bread recipe that you can make and everyone will love. My little girl can eat 3 of these at a time, and I am going to refrain from telling you how many I can eat because it will be way too embarrassing. All right, so as you know, with all my bread recipe, they are very light, fluffy in texture, and it has to do with how you knead the dough. The measurement for your ingredients is very important, but more crucial is knowing how to recognize when your dough is at the stage that it needs to be to give you this very airy, fluffy texture. In this video, I will walk you through step by step, and I will point out different areas where you need to pay attention and the consistency of the dough to be able to give you this fluffy texture. A lot of recipes will give you a time frame on how long to rest your dough. The problem with that is that every kitchen is different and the temperature, the seasons of the year. So I will actually give you a visualization of how your dough should look to give you this texture rather. For this recipe, you will need bread flour, sugar, coconut milk, milk, room temperature butter, room temperature egg, dry instant yeast, salt, and pandan extract. In a large bowl, combine all the dry ingredients. I'm using a separate bowl in the video, but a lot of times what I do is I just add all of this straight to my mixing bowl. We will be using a KitchenAid mixer today. I've added the sugar, the salt, and also the instant yeast. As you can see, I'm kind of placing all of the ingredients a little separate from each other because I want to mix the flour and the salt together first before I mix my yeast in. If you mix the yeast in directly with your salt, what that's going to do is it's going to deactivate your yeast and you won't be able to get your bread dough to rise. So after you combine everything well, we're going to set this aside and we'll start putting our wet ingredients together. So for the wet ingredients, we have coconut milk, and the coconut milk does need to be at room temperature. And we'll also add in our regular milk. To this, we will add 1 room temperature egg. This is a large size egg. And also about a teaspoon of our pandan extract. Now whisk everything together well until everything is fully incorporated. All right, let's get to making our dough. Add the dry ingredients to our mixing bowl, and with a hook attachment, we will incorporate our wet ingredient to the dry ingredient. I have timed everything perfectly for you. The mixing or the stirring process will take 1 minute. Use a timer. After the 1 minute, increase your speed to number 2. On number 2, you will be mixing this dough for about 10 minutes. At about 5 minutes, you will see that the dough is very nicely incorporated and it doesn't stick to the bowl. There's a little bit on the bottom, but that's okay. It is a little bit of a wet dough. At this point, go ahead and stop the mixing and rest it for 10 minutes. Once you've rested for 10 minutes, kick the speed back to number 2, and we're going to knead it for another 10 minutes. About 1 minute into this process, you will begin to add in your room temperature butter. Do this slowly. It will take about a minute for you to add all of your butter in. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, just knead this dough by hand. Use the timing that I have provided as well. You will see once you fully add in all of the butter, the dough is going to break apart. That is perfectly fine. Eventually, when everything is reincorporated, the dough will come together again like you see here. This should happen in about 10 minutes. At the end of the 10 minutes, we're going to take the dough off of the hook and we will rest this dough. I'm going to show you what this dough looks like at the end of the 20-minute of our kneading process. As you can see, the dough is very smooth. It is very shiny. It feels very stretchy. It is not hard. And if you stretch out the dough, you will see that it stretched very, very nicely and very thin. This is an indication that the dough has been kneaded to the stage that it needs to be to get you that fluffy texture. At this point, go ahead and roll your dough into a ball and we will put it back into our mixing bowl to rest. So spray a little bit of Pam into the mixing bowl or vegetable oil just so that when the dough rises, it doesn't stick so much to the bowl. Cover this with plastic wrap and cover over that with a towel and we will rest this dough. Now, as a reference, it can take anywhere between an hour to an hour and a half. But again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, your kitchen environment might be different, the temperature might be different, the humidity. So the key thing is to wait for your dough to rise about 2 times or 2.5 times the size of your original dough that you started with. Look how beautiful this dough is. As you can see when I'm pulling up the dough from the side, it's very stretchy and it doesn't just tear apart. And if you look at the bottom where I'm pulling up the dough, you can see the glutens have all formed very nicely. This is exactly what you're looking for. Once the dough has been deflated, go ahead and transfer it to a working surface. Do apply some oil to the working surface so that the dough doesn't stick to it. We are going to measure this dough. The baking pan that I'm using can hold up to 12 rolls, so I am dividing this by 12. Each of the little ball that I will shape this into will weigh approximately about 56 grams. The easiest thing to do is to divide this ball into two. From there, we will roll it into a log and divide it into 6 pieces each. You really don't have to go through all of this process. You really can just eyeball it and cut it into 12, 16, however big or small you want your buns to come out to be and how much your pan can hold. The benefit of having each one of these weigh about the same is that once you shape it and bake it, all of the rolls will come out very evenly and nicely shaped in uniform. Once they all have been divided up evenly, take each of the individual one and roll them up into a small ball. As I'm rolling this into a ball, you can see that I'm trying to take the outside of the dough and folding it towards the inside because that was the drier part, and by doing this you can help that area become less dry. Once we have shaped all of the doughs into these little balls, we are going to rest it for about 15 to 20 minutes. During this resting process, we're allowing the dough to relax and come together so that once we reshape it into its final form, it will be much easier. Coat your baking pan with a little bit of oil so that when it bakes, it doesn't stick to the pan. Time to shape this into its final form. Repeat the step that we did earlier. Take a little bit of dough and pinch it towards the bottom. After that, using the palm of your hand, roll it in a circular motion really fast to form its final shape. Repeat this process with the rest of them. Place them into your baking pan and make sure that you align them somewhat evenly to give a little bit of space in between each of the balls so it will have some room to rise. Place a kitchen towel over your baking tray and allow your dough to rest. Allow it to rise to 2.5 times its original size. If you don't let it rise enough, your bread is going to come out very dense. But if you let it rise too much, then when it bakes, it's going to collapse. And then again, your bread is still going to be dense. Add some cornstarch to the top of your dough so that when we bake it, it can still retain the very nice green color. In a preheated oven, we are going to bake this at 320 degrees for about 20 to 22 minutes. And here is our finished bread. I cannot tell you how amazing this smells. The smell of the pandan and the coconut and the baked bread, it is just a wonderful aroma. Look at this bread. The color is beautiful. It still retains that green from the pandan extract. The top of the bread is just slightly golden. It is not brown, all because we powder with the cornstarch. The inside is so airy, fluffy, and light. It is not dry at all. It's still very moist. So let's recap. To be able to get your bread to this kind of consistency, there was a couple key steps that we had to pay attention to. First, you have to knead it for 10 minutes, rest for 10 minutes, and knead again for another 10 minutes. Your dough needs to be shiny, it needs to be very smooth, it should not be hard, and when you stretch it, it needs to stretch pretty far without any tear. Lastly, when you rest the dough, it needs to rise to 2.5 times its size, allowing enough time for it to create that airy, fluffy texture and structure in the inside. That's it. I hope you like this recipe and I hope you like this video. If you do, please hit the like button below, comment, and subscribe. Also hit the notification button so you'll be notified when I post my next video.